Shabbat HaChodesh is, among other things, a reminder that Passover is around the corner. We're not hosting a communal Seder at Beth Tikvah this year. So what that means is people are turning to us who don't have anywhere to go and asking if anyone might have room at their tables. So if you are hosting a Seder and do have room for a guest, it's actually a very important thing. Kol dichvin yetei v'yechol, a very important thing to invite people who have nowhere to go. If you do have room, please do let me know over email or Rabbi Zilberstein. And also, if you have nowhere to go, also let me know. Nobody should be spending Pesach alone. It's been enough of that. And if we can put people together and make some shidduchim, that would be wonderful. This is a special Shabbat at Beth Tikvah also. We're celebrating the birthday of our past president and someone you might call certainly a matriarch of our congregation, Merle Goldman. Happy birthday to you. There are some people who are so much a core of our congregational life that I've said the shul reflects their character and their vision. And I think Merle is definitely one of those people. I always try and make sure that whatever we're doing, it gets her blessing. Sometimes it doesn't, but I think she's always pushing the leadership of the shul to do more, to get better, to progress with the values that have been, I think, a part of your life since you were young. And I hope that we're making you proud. Really, there's a sense that Merle watches over us. And I would just wish you many more years of health, happiness, time with your wonderful family, and happy occasions to celebrate in the future. Happy birthday. Parashat Vayakhel is the portion we read this morning. I know it was a long one, because here we have basically a blueprint for the construction of the Mishkan. It's a complicated structure that has to be built. Before all of the rules are given for how you build the Mishkan was the sanctuary that traveled through the wilderness with our ancestors, sort of an earlier version of the temple, right? It was their sacred shrine. Before we hear any of the rules, there's a warning that Moses gives. Sheishet yamim ta'aseh melacha. You can work on this 6 days of the week. Bayom hashvi'i yelachem kodesh. Shabbat Shabbaton la'Hashem. But on the seventh day, remember, it's Shabbat. Kol oseh bo melacha yumat. You do work on that day, you'll be put to death. So this is a pairing that is actually well known in the Torah. Whenever it seems the Mishkan is spoken of in a few places throughout the Torah, somehow Shabbat makes its way into the discussion. Earlier in Parashat Kitisa, on the summit of Mount Sinai, God follows his commandments to Moses concerning the construction of the sanctuary with this immediate warning. Ach et shabtotai tishmoru. Build a sanctuary, but don't forget Shabbat. The admonition introduces a series of further directives concerning Shabbat. And the book of Vayikra, Shabbat and the sanctuary are again connected. My Sabbaths you shall observe, and my sanctuary you shall revere. I am the Lord. Shabbat and the Mishkan. The repeated pairing of these two ideas is clearly intentional, and it serves as the source for a series of foundational halachic observations on the part of the rabbis. One of them is described by Rashi, he's the famous Torah commentator, on his commentary on the first verse of our Parsha. Hiktim lahem azarat Shabbat letzivui melechet hamishkan lomar she'eino doche et hashabbat. So what Rashi says on the second verse, I think, in this Parsha. The whole reason for Moses giving the warning, don't forget Shabbat, is to show that Shabbat is more important than the building of the sanctuary. You can't say just because I'm building a holy site, I don't have to respect the laws of Shabbat. And actually, all of the famous 39 forbidden categories of labor, if you've studied the laws of Shabbat, like I know you all do on a regular basis, you know about the 39 forbidden categories of labor. All of them are derived. How do we know what they are? The Torah doesn't list them. We know what they are because we ask the question, well, we're told that we shouldn't build the sanctuary on Shabbat, so therefore all of the different labors, and we enumerate 39 of them that are required to build the Mishkan, those must be the 39 forbidden labors of Shabbat. That's how we know what is allowed and what is prohibited on Shabbat to this day. So the Torah brings the two concepts together. You have sacred space, the tabernacle, and sacred time, Shabbat. This pairing, the building of sacred time and sacred space, I would offer is also hinted at in the Shabbat liturgy every week. Shabbat isn't just something that happens. It's something that has to be built. And the liturgy reflects this. The central and most important prayer of any Jewish prayer service is called the Amidah. It's so essential that it's prayed 3 times a day on a regular weekday, corresponding to the daily offerings that took place in the temple. The weekday Amidah, it's challenging. First of all, it's long. 19 blessings in total. Also, if I told you to recite a long passage 3 times a day, over and over and over again, you're going to be faced with what is the central problem of Jewish prayer. Its regularity and its repetitiveness. It's hard to feel the spark of connection when you're reading the same thing you read this morning. And at Mincha, and our custom, like in many shuls, is to recite Mincha and Mariv together. You're reciting the same thing you just recited 7 minutes earlier. Makes the problem of spontaneity and spirituality very problematic, very difficult during regular days of the week. But you will notice that on Shabbat we are given some respite from this challenge. The Shabbat liturgy is different. It's a break from the regularity and the repetitiveness of the weekday Amidah. And the perceptive will discover that beginning on Friday night, we're embarking within the Amidah on a building project, on a well-conceived theological, liturgical journey. To step back for a moment, again, the weekday Amidah is 19 blessings. What happens on Shabbat? On Shabbat, petitionary prayer is not allowed. You're not allowed to ask God for stuff on Shabbat. We do it anyway, but there's a general prohibition against being too concerned with your own needs and desires on Shabbat. Because if you think too much about what I need, what I don't have, it'll ruin the happiness of the day. So what do we do on Shabbat? We remove all of the central blessings in the Amidah and replace them with one blessing, which is called Kedushat Hayom. We keep the first 3 and the last 3, and 19 blessings turns into 7. So the first problem is solved. We have a shorter Amidah. Everyone likes a shorter prayer service. You've all made that clear to me. A shorter Amidah, and that central text instead of repeating the same central text Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and then Saturday at Musaf, it's different. It changes. Let's start with Friday night. This is going to be a bit of a Sidur lesson. If you want to follow along, the Friday night Amidah is on page 68. In the middle of that Amidah, God creates Shabbat as the exclamation point on all of creation. And God sanctifies it. The word that appears over and over again in that blessing is Kadosh, holy. And the text underscores how old Shabbat is. Before there were any Jews, before there were any people, God set out on a roadmap of His own to create the world with one day that would be holy. The biblical text that is recited in this Amidah should therefore be of no surprise. It's taken from the first few passages of Genesis. Vayakhulu hashamayim ve'aretz v'chol tzva'am. God stopped all the work that He was doing and blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. On Friday night, Shabbat is made holy, but it's alone. Now Shabbat morning, the Amidah we recited about an hour ago. Page 274 if you want to take a look. The blessing begins with Moses feeling pride at what he received as his portion. Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko. Several times in this blessing you find the word Natan, give, and Brit, covenant. This passage is not about creation, but about receiving the gift of Torah at Mount Sinai. And one of the commandments in that Torah, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Shabbat is ot hi, beino ubeini. It is a sign of the covenant between God and the Jewish people. So in the morning Amidah, the text that is quoted from the Torah is Exodus 31, which is our ancestors standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. Now Musaf, the service that we'll recite shortly. We always add a fourth service on Shabbat. It's called Musaf, to remember the additional sacrifice that was offered in the temple on Shabbat and on holidays. The middle blessing in the Musaf Shabbat Amidah, it's on page 374 if you want to test me, recalls the temple service and the communal joy of celebrating Shabbat together. On Friday night, Shabbat is made holy. At Shacharit, Shabbat is ordained. At Musaf, Shabbat is observed. The most common word in the passage is korban, an offering. Shabbat is not only holy, it's not only a sign of the covenant, it is our gift, our offering to God. And finally, we come to the last Amidah on Shabbat, which is recited at Mincha, later this afternoon, page 558. The blessing begins with an interpretation on Zechariah's vision. Zechariah's vision, we sing every service at the end of Aleinu. Bayom hahu yihiyeh Adonai echad ushmo echad. On that day, Zechariah says, there will be a time when God's name shall be one and God shall be one. How does the Mincha Amidah begin? Ata echad v'shimcha echad. At Mincha we feel, in our observance of Shabbat, as it comes to an end, that we've reached some state of happiness, some state where the world is at peace, where God's name is one, and God is one. The reference in this blessing is not to Moses, it's not to the days of creation, it's not to Mount Sinai, it's to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They become timeless characters, not just historical figures. At Mincha, Shabbat is so perfect that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all show up to celebrate Shabbat with us. So notice the 4 evolving themes in the Shabbat Amidah: creation, revelation, mitzvot, and redemption. These themes are a roadmap, they're a journey, or better yet, a blueprint. On Friday night, Shabbat begins as beautiful but lonely. By the time Shabbat ends, even the patriarchs are showing up to celebrate Shabbat with us. How do we bridge the two? With Torah, an appreciation for the wisdom of our tradition, that's Shacharit, and with mitzvot, by actually fulfilling the commandments that make our homes particularly beautiful, that make our observance of Shabbat particularly meaningful. That's the bridge that connects Shabbat at creation with Shabbat at redemption. It's almost like we have a curriculum for the rest of the week. Remember where we're starting off, and remember where you have to end up. Now let me go back to my original question. Why does the building of the sanctuary take a back seat to the observance of Shabbat? Consider the image that our tradition is painting for us through the liturgy. On weekdays, we feverishly work, frantically trying to achieve the goals that we have set. In many ways, it feels like we're building. It looks like we're building. But often on the work days on which we labor, we add precious little to the world. We could be seen as running in place, tired, but not getting anywhere. And we have a liturgy that matches that mood. An Amidah that's repetitive, long. There's no evolving story, no development, no progression. We're just trying to get through. And then comes Shabbat. On Shabbat, many of us might lament that our all-important private efforts have to take a break. We may feel that all of those people who are not observing Shabbat, they're getting ahead of us while we're falling behind. But I think the Siddur itself is there to teach us a secret, to counter this mood, a secret filled with insight that the sacred time that we're building on Shabbat is building something bigger and better. It's building our souls. It's building our relationships. It's building our community. It's even helping to build a better world. To quote the master of Shabbat theology, the late, great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, from his beautiful work, The Sabbath, to set apart one day a week for freedom, a day on which we would not use the instruments which have been so easily turned into weapons of destruction, a day for being with ourselves, a day of detachment from the vulgar, of independence of external obligations, a day on which we stop worshiping the idols of technical civilization, a day on which we use no money, a day of armistice in the economic struggle with our fellow humans and the forces of nature. Is there any institution that holds out a greater hope for humanity's progress than the Sabbath? Today is Shabbat HaChodesh. The Maftir began, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. Loosely translated, time belongs to you. Time belongs to you. It is the currency of life. May God grant us the wisdom to use the time we are given and the Shabbatot we are given to build lives of spiritual meaning, of purpose, and of blessing. Amen.